All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and call this joint committee on the judiciary to order. Welcome everybody today. I want to first start off by thanking all of the staff that put such a hard work into making this happen today. It's apparent how much work went into it. So thank you so much to the legislative staff and the Department of Tourism and everybody with the state that put such a great work into what is just the beginning of a great meeting. We'll go ahead again and call this to order. We will not do a roll call. The clerk is over there, I think, deciding whether or not we have a quorum, but we'll go ahead and get into the program because I know our first presenter, who is listed as our second presenter today, is in high demand and will be going over to the Joint Finance Committee. So we are very lucky to have with us today the Secretary of Tourism, Chelsea Ruby, who is running all over the place today. Madam Secretary, we appreciate you being here and for your hard work in this meeting, and take it away whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for being here. I know over the years, you've all heard me speak about the impacts of tourism, but I don't know that I've ever been so excited to have all of you in one place to actually experience what's happening and to see tourism in action. So to those of you who have been out on tours, I hope you've enjoyed it. To those of you who have not, there's still time. Please make sure that you get out and explore the area while you're here. So thank you all for having me to this committee. I appreciate it. What I'd like to do today is just go through kind of an overview, an update on where tourism in West Virginia stands right now and what we are doing with the funds that you've trusted us with the last several years. So just as an overview, and I realize this isn't finance, but just I want to make sure everyone kind of knows the trajectory of where we're going. If you open up to the first page in this handout, I want to start by going through tourism by the numbers. I want you to get a real idea of where we are. So each year, travelers in the state are spending about $5 billion. That is supporting about 42,000 direct jobs. If we include the indirect tourism jobs, that gets you up to about 78,000. Those workers are being paid $1.3 billion, and we are generating about $750 million in annual state and local revenue. If you look at this chart down here, you see the trajectory. So tourism was on the decline. We had about 5 years where we had seen those numbers of traveler spending in the state going down. This was at a time where much of the nation, or most of the nation, was growing. Come in 2017, and we came to you all and asked for additional funding. We said, we've got to step it up. We've got to change the way we're doing things and start investing in the economy. And you see here very clearly on this chart that those numbers started skyrocketing. We fell, like most of the country or all of the country, during COVID, and then now we are back up to pre-pandemic levels. So right now, nationwide, the country is still down about 27% to pre-pandemic levels. But I'm happy to report that's not the case here in West Virginia. We're actually up about 3.8% at the end of last year. And I can tell you we will have an even higher growth rate for this year. So things have completely rebounded here. Last year, we saw growth in each of our 9 travel regions, and things are really recovering. So if you'll switch over to the second page here, cooperative advertising program. One of the big asks I had for you when I first took over tourism and came and said we want to restructure was looking at the way we handle our relationship with private industry. For years and years, the tourism department had given out grants. They were matching grants for tourism. And when we came in, we studied it and we tried to figure out how can we do this in a more efficient way? How can we provide better results? So we modeled this program off of Pure, Michigan, and the way that they do it. It's called our Cooperative Advertising Program. Since we launched that program in 2017, it's a public-private partnership fund. We have purchased with our partners more than 14 million in advertising, and that's supporting more than 100 businesses around the state. Here's a few examples of these ads that we've run with different partners. And then at the bottom, you'll see I did a little blurb on a recent partnership that we did with the rafting companies in Southern West Virginia. They came to us and said, we're going to pool our money together, and we want to work with the state to do a large scale partnership. So what we were able to do is purchase advertising and sponsorships with the Columbus Crew, Cincinnati Reds, and Pittsburgh Penguins for them. And they had an exhibit at the Cincinnati Children's Museum. So the way we did that is we looked at their target audiences. We looked at where rafters were coming to the southern part of the state from. And then we went out and tried to find places where people in our demographics who are coming and rafting were, and we purchased advertising there. So it was a great partnership. Again, this is through a public-private partnership fund that you all have allowed us to set up. The way it works is it's a 50-50 match. It's every dollar that those companies put in, we gave them a match. We do all the creative, so it all is consistent. It looks the same. You've also got the buying power of the state behind it, so we get much lower rates than they would get on their own. So these are just a couple of examples, but I wanted to make sure to start off by letting you know that this partnership has been extremely, extremely productive. It's been a great way to do this and a much more productive way to manage these funds. So if you turn to the next page, this is looking at brand partnerships and promotions. So you all know that we do a lot of advertising in the traditional sense. So there's TV, radio, digital, print, outdoor boards, but we also try to look at events and how can we recruit events here and how can we partner with companies who have products with audiences that line up with our audiences. So we have a line item in our budget for events and sponsorships, and we use this line item for three basic things. The first one is we use it for sponsorships. So we're always looking for new innovative ways to partner. This top picture is from, this was taken recently about 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C. At the arena downtown for a Capitals game. We are one of the main sponsors of the Washington Capitals this year. We've been able to do complete takeovers of these screens. So in this one, these were videos playing with leaves falling. The Almost Heaven was going around the board, and there were trivia games, all kinds of ways, but we're trying to make sure that we're not just in the places where you expect advertisements like TV and radio, but that we're also becoming a part of different experiences that our audience is used to in places that they go. So we're very excited about this Capitals partnership. We have several other ones, but this is a new one and I wanted to highlight it. We also work on recruiting major events to the state. So two that I'll mention here. One is the UCI World Cup, which is the World Mountain Bike Championship. So over 6,000 international mountain bikers came to Snowshoe earlier this year. Huge, huge event, great promotion for the state and one that we helped with. Another one is in just a couple of weeks, Milam Park is going to be hosting the USA National Diving Championship. At the newly renovated newly constructed, Milam Park facility just outside of Morgantown. One other note here, you all may have seen the press release, but we are also a contender to get the US or the Olympic diving trials at the same facility. So that's part of what we do with those funds is go out and recruit these big events and make sure that we're able to get them to West Virginia. And then last but not least, I hope you all saw our Country Roads camper, the Airstream outside when you arrived. We take that to events all over West Virginia, all over the country. And then even most recently, we took it to Toronto to a trade show. So we're out there making sure that we're getting the word out about West Virginia. The next page just walks you through some of our private investment. I've talked to you all before about the Tourism Development Act tax credit. It is one of the strongest tax credits in the country. It didn't have a lot of activity on it in those years before we got here. And the reason for that is just because the tourism industry was not growing. Hotel occupancies were not increasing. So new hotels weren't being built at the same rate. Now what we're seeing with these numbers skyrocketing is we're attracting more private investment than ever before. When I first started that first year, you all actually added development into our section of code. Previously, we had just worked on marketing. And for those first couple of years, I handled the economic development and the development piece by myself. I just worked with the Department of Economic Development, and that was that. Today, I'm happy to report that I had to bring in more people because we have so many projects growing. So in the last couple of years, we have received over 300 million in applications that have been approved for that tax credit. And it's helped us with major projects such as the Greenbrier Valley Aquatic Center, the new Schoolhouse Hotel in White Sulphur, Adventures on the Gorge did an expansion. And then we've got the Botanic Gardens Event Center that's going to be opening later this year. So there's lots of big projects. I know last year I talked to you all about Timberline and others that opened last year, the Corduroy Inn at Snowshoe. And then just in the last few minutes, many of you got to see the site of the Hilltop House Hotel that's being constructed in Harpers Ferry. I'm also happy to report that this growth has been widespread. So this isn't something where you're just seeing it in the Eastern Panhandle or New River Gorge. We are seeing these projects literally in every tourism region of the state. So thank you for your continued support. When you reauthorize that tax credit, it is one that is continuing to help not only West Virginia businesses expand, but new ones come into the state. The next page, if you turn the page, tourism advertising is key. This is, I think, one of the most important aspects of what we do. Each year before I come to you, we make sure that we study the ads. We make sure that we are making certain that we are maximizing our effectiveness and that the ads are producing results. So daily, probably my team might tell you hourly, but we're always in looking at the ads, which ads are working, shifting funds around, making sure that we are really putting the dollars in the right place. But one other thing that we look at is we look at how tourism advertising actually impacts things other than tourism. And why that may seem strange, what I'm talking about here is what we in the industry refer to as the halo effect. And it's the idea that tourism has a halo bigger than tourism, and that these tourism ads are actually impacting the state's overall impact or image. So if you look here at the chart with the green bars, you see that our ads, when they're shown to people, it improves the way they think about West Virginia as a place to live, a place to start a career, a place to start a business, to attend college, purchase a vacation home, retire, and work remotely. So this is just showing you that basically when people are exposed to these tourism ads, when they see them on TV, when they hear the radio commercials, it starts to change the way they think about the state. When we first started, we did a bunch of survey research to figure out why were people not coming here and why were they going to the states around us? And what we found in much of that research wasn't that they had a negative impression of West Virginia. It was that they had no impression of West Virginia. They just weren't thinking about us in these areas as far as places to invest, places to go on vacation, places to retire. So this is just to show you that these ads are not only helping tourism, but are also continuing to improve our image in other areas. Moving on, I want to kind of switch directions for a second and talk about the future of tourism in West Virginia. Projections show that West Virginia tourism industry will have an additional 24,000 annual job openings, with 13,000 of those in upper management positions over the next 4 years. So if you stop and think about that, there's a lot of new jobs. Knowing that this is an area where we still haven't fully recovered as far as workforce goes and bringing all of those jobs back, this is one of my biggest concerns is workforce development. Are we ready to handle it? Can we continue to sustain the growth that we're seeing? So we applied for earlier this year and received a $5.2 million US EDA grant, and we're going to devote those funds entirely to workforce development. So it's a wide-ranging program. You'll hear more about it over the next couple of weeks, but I just want you all to know that this is something that we're very proactively looking into, something that we're working on. The $5.2 million will be spent on a variety of things, starting out with middle school education, letting kids know about careers in hospitality and tourism, getting them interested early, going through and adding curriculum in the high school so that they can start earning credit early on, setting up learn and earn programs like the ones that have been set up for manufacturing, but for the tourism industry. And last but not least, putting together programs that can reimburse current tourism employers for trainings for their staff. So there's a lot to unpack with this one. I could give a whole presentation on it, but I wanted to devote a page to it just to let you know that it's something that we think is vital to continued growth in the tourism industry in West Virginia. So on the next page, you'll see some information about state parks. Hopefully you've also seen the chart out here. The state park lines are very similar to what you saw in those initial traveler spending on the first page, where we were fairly flat Then we started really investing in the industry when you all tripled the budget in 2017, saw a dip for COVID and have now seen a huge increase. This chart is a little more extreme than the tourism chart because in addition to the money that has been put in for advertising, you all have also invested $151 million in upgrades to facilities like this one here today. So we're seeing tremendous returns here. The self-sufficiency of our park system started out at about 56% when we started looking at this in 2017. And today I'm happy to report that it's sitting at 72%. So those numbers have increased widely. And the best news is that as we increase the self-sufficiency, as we start generating more funds in these parks, it's allowing us to put more money back into West Virginia's parks. It's allowing us to continue to upgrade these parks and to provide even greater spaces and places for the West Virginians who use them. Next page goes through just some unique initiatives that we have this year, two that I'll bring up. The first one I hope you're all familiar with is the West Virginia Waterfall Trail. This came from a sort of a harebrained idea that I had after looking at digital ad results season after season and seeing that our top performing ad was always a waterfall. Whether it is spring, summer, fall, or winter, that is the thing that always pops up to the top of our list. So I said, let's create a waterfall trail. So we did that. We've got 29 waterfalls across the state. You check into them on your phone as you're going around, and we will send you prizes. This is an initiative. We didn't put much advertising dollars behind it at all. It was really a public relations initiative just to get the word out to West Virginians and folks in the region that if they're looking to find things to do and move around the state, that this was a great way to do it. Since we launched it in June, we've had more than 25,000 check-ins at our waterfalls. We've had visitors from all 49 states, and I need to find somebody from that 50th. And we've shipped over 3,200 prizes. So this is one that we're going to continue. If we're going to continue adding waterfalls, if there's a waterfall in your district that's missing from our list, please let me know. But we're very, very excited about this. A similar partnership that we've done this year is with a company called All Trails. How many of you are familiar with All Trails? A couple. Okay, so All Trails is the #1 hiking app. It's a mobile app. They have over 80 million downloads. They've got maps all over the world. So you can go on any trail. They'll have data available, put it into your phone. Your phone will give you step-by-step instructions, even if you don't have cell service. So it's a great partner. So we decided that we wanted to get with them to do outreach to people who are avid hikers and are hiking in the states around us. So through this partnership, they're allowing us to give free pro memberships to folks who are hiking in West Virginia so they can have that subscription. It's about a $40 a year subscription. And when we started this partnership, All Trails told us, we'll consider this a success if you can get about 1,000 redemptions. We had 1,000 in the first day. And I'm happy to report that since we launched it about 60 days ago, we've had more than 22,000 code requests for those promo codes and for that free subscription. So we're really excited about this. We've had more than 145 million media impressions, and we have been able to update dozens of trails around the state. So keep looking for more information on this, but it's one that I think will turn into a very fruitful and long-term partnership for us. Last but not least, if you look on this back page, I always get questions about which markets are we in. And when I first got here, we were advertising to about a 3-hour driving radius. We've now increased that, you can see, to much further than 3 hours, and we have added some fly markets. So this at the top is just a list of our current markets where we're running paid ads, and some samples of ads below. Then on the very back page, there is a list of county economic impact. So this will show you for each one of our counties how much travelers are spending there annually and how many jobs the tourism industry is supporting. Again, I want to go back to the point I made in the beginning. We've seen growth in each of our 9 travel regions last year, and traveler spending in the state is now about 13.6 million a day. So that's how much travelers are spending. Now I want to end with this last sheet, which I have in here, that talks about public relations. All of the major travel publications do these lists each year. They put out 5, 10, 15 of the top travel destinations. As far as I can find in records, I cannot find where we were ever selected as one of these top states. This year, we've been recognized as a top travel destination by Lonely Planet, CNN, Condé Nast, USA Today, and Frommer's. We are the only state, only region, only destination to be on more than one of these lists, and we're on 5 of them. So I want to tell you, I'm super, super excited to see the investments that you all have made in tourism paying off. This is changing the way the world thinks about West Virginia and the way people perceive our state, not just as a tourism destination, but also as a place to live, to invest, and to retire. So thank you all for your continued investment. I know that was a lot and I went fast and I was late, but I hope that that gives you an overview of where we are in the industry right now. And I'm more than happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. That was a lot, but all good news and exciting. She does seem to be in a question fielding mood. Are there any? I'll recognize the co-chair, Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chelsea, thank you very much for being here. And I want to say publicly here in front of everybody, thank you so much for all the work that you did and your staff to make it possible for us to bring the interim committee meetings over here to Cacapon. All of us in Morgan County love to show it off. We're very proud of the parks here. And so I do have a question. And if you will, can you comment a little bit on the investment that's being made at Cacapon on trails, additional bike trails? All of us here in this county are very excited about it because we're seeing in real time what it's doing in terms of bringing people to this county. But I know you've had a leader, you and the governor both have had enthusiastic positions on that. And I'd invite you to say anything about that you'd like to.
Yeah, sure. I would love to. And thank you for your leadership in getting this resort built. I remember this was my first exchange I actually had with Senator Trump was when he was trying to get the funding through for this in my first couple of weeks here. So it's great to be here and to have all of you here in this nice, new, beautiful facility. So this is an area, and I gave some information today when I was on the bus, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think in 2017, Morgan County had about 30 million a year in annual traveler spending. At the end of last year, they were at about 55 million. So there has been very, very quick and impressive growth in this area. In fact, during the pandemic, Morgan County was one of the counties that actually started outpacing pre-pandemic levels first. We kept seeing this data coming in and saying, is this right? Are there really more people arriving in the county than there were the previous year? And turns out there actually were. So there's a lot of things going on, but one exciting project that the senator mentioned that's going on here is up on the mountain. And I hope before you all leave, you'll get a chance to go up and see if you haven't already. There's been a tremendous amount of work done on mountain biking trails. They're regularly hosting mountain biking competitions for students in the area and in the region. But most recently, we were awarded a US EDA grant to really expand that facility. It's about $3.5 million, I believe. The state put in $750,000 as a match. But it is going to make this park and this mountain one of the premier places in the state to ride mountain bikes. Mountain biking is a sport that's growing in West Virginia. It's not just for students. It's also something we're seeing across all age demographics. One other place you can look to get an idea of the impact of mountain biking is snowshoe. If you look at snowshoes numbers 4 or 5 years ago, they were primarily a winter destination. They were doing really, really well in the winter, and then they would almost shut down in the spring and summer. They've turned those ski lifts into mountain bike chair lifts. They run people up and down all summer, and they are now truly a 4-season destination. In fact, they announced just yesterday that they were going to be investing more in those lifts. So I give that as an example to say, although it's a larger scale project, Senator, I think you will expect to see exponential results here in Morgan County as well.
Thanks.
I know the Secretary Ruby is in high demand and we need to get her over to the Joint Committee on Finance, but I did see the senator from Tucker. We'll give him the floor and that'll be the last question. We'll get you moving, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be brief. Thank you, Kelsey, and I want to echo Senator Trump's comments that you're doing a wonderful job. We appreciate what you've did for tourism in the state. And me being in the middle of tourism in Tucker County, that's what my questions be. Of course, you know, Tucker County has just boomed since quarter H is, you know, can dump them right into Tucker County. And we have less than 7,000 citizens in Tucker County through the week. And on the weekend, it goes to about 30,000, a lot of times, sometimes more. And so I'm just wondering, is tourism or the governor's office, anybody looking into how to help these counties like Tucker County and Fayette County is going to be the same thing with the national park. But I know in Tucker County, we are struggling to provide services for these people. You know, it's like 80% of our emergency EMS calls, whether fire, police, ambulance, on the average is from tourism. And it's a struggle on on the county trying to not only provide those services, but the infrastructure that with the growth, you know, I mean, our sewer systems are overwhelmed, their water systems are overwhelmed, you know, all of our infrastructure. And it seems like there's no help there. The state, you know, wants to dump everybody into the county, and I appreciate it. I mean, we've grown, but you know, housing, you know, with growth, you know, you have to hire people. There's no place to live up there because, you know, of lack of housing. And it's, I guess it's a good thing, but it has really put the pressure on our county. You know, our county commissioners are constantly trying to, you know, come up with ways. I've had tried to get a bill passed last couple of years for the amusement tax, expand it to the counties. The municipalities can use it now, but the counties can't use it. And, you know, the governor is going across his feel-good tour the last couple of weeks or months has really pushed, you know, local control. But we have no local control, you know, and it just seems like we're beating our head against the wall up there. It's not that we don't appreciate the growth, but it really puts a burden on a county that has less than 7,000 citizens. And it seems like no one wants to help. And I just want your thoughts on that. Have you come up, you know, the CVBs, I know, you know, Tucker County's has got more money they can spend right now, and they're even putting it in, you know, savings accounts or money market accounts or whatever they put it in, because there are more money than what they can spend. And our county commissioners are trying to scrape together enough money to run our EMS and fire. And, you know, it's just frustrating to me. You know, I'm glad to see the state grow, but it is really putting a burden on the citizens of Tucker County, I know. And I just like to have your thoughts on, is there any plans in the working to try to help these? Because Tucker County is just right now is probably the worst, but you know, you got Pocahontas County, you've got Fayette County, all of them are going to start seeing this. And being rural counties, we don't have the you know, tools that a lot of your bigger counties have.
Yeah, sure. So happy to address that one. So if you look at tourism growth around the state, certainly in any industry, when you grow, there are going to be needs to build up infrastructure. So we have taken a number of measures over the last couple of years to make sure resources are available to those counties. So one, we came to you all last year and asked for assistance with the Build WV program to do just that, to find areas around the state where there were housing shortages due to tourism growth or other economic impact growth. So thank you all for your support on that one. The other one you mentioned, infrastructure. Certainly in your area, there are water and sewer concerns and upgrades needed. Last year, the Economic Enhancement Fund was set up. And although that fund was initially just set up for water and sewer development, there's now a provision in there that allows us to look at tourism and economic development, commerce related projects. So those are areas where we've got additional funding for infrastructure. Happy to talk to you all about them. The EMS issue in Tucker County, if you and I can talk about that as kind of a sidebar, it sounds like there's some other issues into play with a levy and a household fee being eliminated. So we can talk through those, but certainly we are open and want to make sure that we are supporting these counties and getting them resources to be able to support this development moving forward.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. I've been informed that the Joint Committee on Finance was a little impatient. So if there are other questions, we'll ask questions and we'll save our comments for chatter later. The Secretary, I think, will probably be around. Delegate from Fayette.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I just would like to know if you can. So the dollars that West Virginia spends on tourism versus the tax revenue received from tourism, can you give us a rough estimate of the rate of return on investment?
Yeah, so it had the last study that we did, and I can get you for that, or I can get that for you, excuse me, was about 8-1 as far as marketing dollars to return. It kind of depends on which specific pot you're looking at. So this was actually set up for my finance meeting since I knew I was doing that first. So it follows the lines in the budget. So it depends on which specific line you're looking at. But 8-1 is generally a good number to look at when you're looking at tourism return. And remember, and the reason why those numbers are so high is if you think about a tourist coming into a local community, they're not only paying the sales tax, but they are paying, tax on their gases. And then they're also paying tax, a 6% tax on their occupancy. So going back to the Tucker County example is, when you check into a hotel, you're going to pay that 6%. Thanks to this body, starting January of this year, if you check into a vacation rental, you're also going to be paying that 6%. That 6% goes directly to the county. They take 3% of it and put it back into travel and tourism promotion through your convention and visitors bureaus. The other 3% goes to the county for parks and recs and other uses that the county deems appropriate. So there's a great rate of return on a visitor to the state.
Further questions? Further questions? Seeing none. Thank you so much,
Sure.
Chelsea, for being here. We really appreciate it. And thank you to all your staff for putting together such a great meeting. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
And I'll be around the next couple of days. So I'm sorry, I've got to jet to the next meeting, but if you need me, I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. All right, folks, next on our agenda, which was listed as first, is I'm sure our presenter knows something equally as riveting and exciting. But if you'll recall, we had a presentation, I believe, by the Chief Justice that gave us sort of a preview of what the court was going to do as it related to a study of workload. We've had some dialogue over the past several years on apportionment of where our judges are and how many people are there and caseload, et cetera. And there were many on this committee that had interest in that. So with that backdrop, Keith Hoover is here, whom I believe we all know. He's the Deputy Administrative Director and Counsel for the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals. We're happy to have him with us today, and he's going to provide a preview. You should have a deck in front of you that he's prepared. Mr. Hoover, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the invitation to come and address the body and to provide a preview of the workload study that's going to be coming up in the regular session. So again, my name is Keith Hoover. If we haven't met, I'm the Deputy Administrative Director and Counsel in the Administrative Office at the Supreme Court. One of the things I want to do before I forget is on the packet that I put in front of you, I put my card. It has my cell phone number and email address on it. I welcome if there's ever any questions, comments, anything that you all would like to know about the court system. One of my jobs that I do for the Supreme Court is I serve as liaison between the court and the legislature and the court and other parts of state government. So feel free to reach out to me anytime if you have questions, comments, concerns, anything. We want to be able to help you, and I'm welcome to have those discussions at any time. So we're here today to talk about the ongoing judiciary workload study. And this, when we're talking about workload studies, what we're talking about here is the allocation of how many judges and magistrates in the circuits and counties around the state. So the goal of this presentation is that I wanted to provide an overview of the West Virginia judicial system, just as kind of some background information. I want to talk about past workload studies that were done, and I want to talk about the current workload study methodology. And the whole reason that we're doing this is I don't actually have a plan to present, because the plan is going to come, or the numbers, the report are going to come during the regular session. But we thought it was important to go ahead and present kind of the background of what we're doing to provide some background information, so that when the report is submitted before the session, that the members understand why you have it, what the background is, how they got to where it came out, and are ready to proceed on that when the session starts. I want to give a little background on some issues with our courts. I know that a lot of members on this committee know these details, but these are important points to understand when we are talking about these issues. And so when we're talking about our circuit judges, there are 75 circuit judges broken up in 31 circuits in the state. They serve 8-year terms. They're elected in nonpartisan elections, and the current salary is $138,600. Circuit courts are our general jurisdiction courts. Some examples of the types of things that they do: they handle felony criminal cases, they handle abuse and neglect cases, juvenile issues, civil cases over $7,500, and appeals from magistrate court. I wanted to provide a map of the current circuits. Again, probably hard to see on the screen, but that's in your handout, and also in the booklet that I provided if you want to see how your current circuit is allocated. When we talk about our family court judges, there are 47 judges in 27 circuits. They also are elected to 8-year terms in nonpartisan elections with a salary of $103,950. These are limited jurisdiction courts that deal with domestic relations issues. So we're talking divorces, paternity, child custody, parenting plans, parental responsibility, family support, child support enforcement, grandparent visitation, and final domestic violence hearings. I do want to make the point, because this is something that gets confused quite a bit, is people hear family courts and they think family courts are where abuse and neglect happens. Abuse and neglect cases happen in circuit court, not in family court. So just wanted to clarify that in case there's any confusion there, because that's something that people get confused quite often. And again, same thing, here's the map of the current circuits, and you have copies of that in your handout. Magistrates, there are currently 159 magistrates in all 55 counties. They're elected to 4-year terms, nonpartisan elections, and they make $63,250. All that is required of a magistrate is a high school diploma. And some of the types of cases that they would hear would be misdemeanor criminal cases. They do initial appearance, set bail, felony preliminary hearings, handle civil cases less than $7,500. They do search warrants and protective orders, evictions, and worthless checks. And the other thing that's worth noting about the magistrate courts is we like to talk about magistrate court as being the emergency room of the court system. And what we mean by that is 24/7, nights, weekends, holidays, there is a magistrate that is on call, available in every county in the state to handle things that come up overnight, nights, weekends. So they really truly are kind of the front door for the court system. This is a slide that we recognize that the finance committees see this information every year, but I wanted to provide it today again because I think it's relevant to discussion. So the Supreme Court's annual budget is $149 million, and 82% of that goes to our 1,572 full-time employees. And so what I wanted you to see here is just a breakdown of where that money is primarily spent. And so you can see by far the biggest, or not by far, but you can see the biggest expenditure that the court has is magistrate court. $30 million of that goes to magistrate court. The next one is circuit court. That's $29 million. Then our probation officers, and then family court comes in at $11 million. So the vast majority of what the Supreme Court's budget is, you see how that's already allocated. And again, that's important when you're looking at costs related to these courts to understand that. So the law of the state, the Constitution of our state, says that the legislature has the power to create judicial circuits and to determine the number of circuit judges, family court judges, and magistrates. So this is a legislative function, and you can see the citations in our Constitution for where that's listed. When it comes to the circuit courts, the Constitution says that the legislature may increase or decrease other than the term decrease the number of circuit judges within any circuit. And here's the important language, is that it says the legislature at any session thereof held in the odd number year preceding the time for the full term election of judges. That's a really confusing way to say, if you're going to do it, you have to do it in the odd number year before the election. So this coming year is why if we are going to do a reallocation, this has to be the session to do it. By constitutionally, if we're going to do it, it has to be this session. So that's why we're talking about this now. Family courts, there really is no specific language about when it has to be done. It just says time to time. We will note, though, that our Constitution says that once somebody's in office, that they shall continue in office unless removed by impeachment. And so we think that interpretation of that says that you can't eliminate a judge midterm. They have to be able to serve the remainder of their term. So there's no specific language in that, but we think the same interpretation would apply. If we're going to do it, it has to be in this upcoming session. When we talk about our magistrates are a little different because House Bill 2910 that passed last year, this bill directed the Supreme Court to do a workload study. If you all, I'm sure, remember that this was the bill where we talked about changing the number of magistrates. What this final version of this bill said is the Supreme Court was supposed to do a caseload study and that we would enter an administrative order by January 5th with our proposed allocation of magistrates. It can't have more than 170. And it can't reduce any magistrate below the current level in a county. And then what's going to happen is the legislature can either reject that. However, if no bill is passed, then the allocation in the administrative order becomes the allocation. And this process is going to repeat every 4 years now. So when we talk about workload studies, we retained the National Center for State Courts to assist us in these studies. They are the national experts in doing this. They've done this work in 40 states, and they've done this work in West Virginia before. We don't have the resources or the knowledge to do this internally, so we had to go outside and hire these consultants to come in and the experts to help us do this caseload study. And so the leadership of the legislature asked us after the session to go ahead and do this study and to look at all three: circuit courts, family courts, and magistrate courts. So that's what we're doing currently. For those who have been around a while, this is going to sound familiar because we went through the same process in 2006 and 2014. There was some discussion during the session about a 2018 or 19 study. I just want to point out that that was not the full National Center for State Court study, that there was an effort by the legislature in Senate Bill 261, I believe it was in 2019, to reallocate the number of magistrates. And I know a lot of work went into that. It did not pass. So the last time there's actually been a full study of this was back in 2014. So when we talk about our circuit courts before the 2014 study, here's how the circuits were allocated. And again, the only thing I want you to see in this is before 2014. And then after 2014, before we had 70 judges. After 2014, we increased that number to 75 circuit judges. The Fifth Circuit, Mason, Jackson, Ronan, Calhoun got a judge. The 10th Circuit, Raleigh got a judge. The 19th Circuit, Taylor and Barber got a judge, but they did not get it in that session. They had to wait a couple years to get an extra judge. 23rd Circuit, Morgan, Berkeley, and Jefferson got a judge. And the 26th Circuit, Lewis and Upshur got a judge. So those were the 5 that were added as a result of the 2014 study. When it comes to our family courts, again, this is what it was before 2014. And after the study, Cabell County got an extra judge, and Mineral, Hampshire, and Morgan got a judge. So we went from 45 up to 47. When we talk about our magistrates prior to 2014, here's the allocation. And what's interesting about this is there has been no real change in number of magistrates. As a result of House Bill 2910, last year, Berkeley County got a magistrate. So that's been the only significant change is Berkeley County getting an additional magistrate. Everything else is still relatively the same as it's been since 2014. So a few other historical notes is the last time that a circuit line was changed was in 1999 when Mason County was split from Putnam County. The family court circuits were modified in 2015, and so those are relatively new circuits in terms of the allocation or the actual circuit lines. And like I said, Barber and Taylor County added the judge in 2019. Berkeley and Nicholas County added 1 magistrate in 2001. But really, other than that, prior to House Bill 4009 in 2000, the magistrates were allocated by a mathematical formula. And so one of the questions that came up a lot during the last session is how do we get to the number of magistrates that are currently as exist? And the answer to that is, even though the law changed in 2000 to change it from this mathematical formula to this workload idea, we're still have the magistrates allocated as the last formula existed in 2000. So there has not been really a change in the number of magistrates in a very long time. When we talk about this workload study, we want to go through a little bit about the methodology just so you understand kind of how this all works. One of the important things to note is that the National Center asked us for our 2017, 2018, and 2019 caseload data. They said, we don't want 2020, we don't want 2021, because nationwide, what they're seeing is COVID messed up all the numbers statistically for those 2 years. So we're looking at 2017, 2018, 2019. We're not looking at 2020 or 2021 because COVID changed those numbers pretty significantly. Our circuit judges and family court judges, are doing a time study and a Delphi study. The magistrate court is only doing a Delphi study, and I'm going to explain what those are here in a second. And then also a part of this, we've created a work group of circuit judges. There's a work group of family court judges, a work group of magistrates, and then of course the administrative office at the Supreme Court is providing support for all three of those studies. So when we talk about how we determine workload, we talked about a little bit about this during the session, but caseload alone is not an accurate indicator of how busy judges are. And I'm going to jump ahead a slide to show you this number. Here's a great example of what we mean by that. So if you look at statewide numbers and filings in 2014, there were 51,456 filings. In 2019, there were 43,746 statewide filings. So that's a 14% decrease. Well, if you just looked at that, you would think the numbers are going down. However, if you look at abuse and neglect cases in the same time frame, 2014, there were 4,005 abuse and neglect cases. 2019, there were 5,975. That's a 50% increase in the number of abuse and neglect cases over the same time period. Now, if you've ever talked to a circuit judge about their current workload or what they're doing, I'm sure they will tell you that abuse and neglect cases are by far what they are most what they are most busy with. Abuse and neglect cases, they're called docket eaters because they just take up so much time and require so much attention. And so, you know, if you just look at the raw numbers, it may look like there's less work, but because of the increase in abuse and neglect, there's probably more work in circuit courts than there's ever been. The other thing you have to look at when you look at workload studies is that population alone is not an accurate indicator of how busy the judges are, because one of the reasons is geography. Border counties would have more population centers. That's going to impact how busy the courts are. If there's a major roadway that goes through town, that's going to impact how busy the courts are. There's socioeconomic factors that come into play because unfortunately those socioeconomic issues determine how, unfortunately determine the amount of interactions people have with the court system. The existence of industries such as tourism, we talked a little bit about in the last presentation, areas where there's a lot of tourism, areas where you have transient workforces, whether it's construction workers, pipeline workers, people who aren't accurately picked up in the census numbers, but who are in your counties and interact with the court system. Existence of correctional facilities, higher education locations, all those things impact how busy courts are and are not necessarily reflected in population alone. And so what the National Center tells us, because they're the experts in this, is that weighted caseload studies are the best way to do this. And when we talk about weighted caseload studies, what this means is it's a study that attaches a value to determine the difference of degrees of complexity between case types. And so what we do is we take the case weight that's mathematically determined, and that number is reflected in an average time in minutes to resolve a case type. So when we talk case weight, it's an average time in minutes. And so you take your caseload data times your case weight, and that's how you get your workload result. The case weights are determined, again, from the circuit and family courts. They're doing a time study currently. This is the last week of it. It ends this Friday. The time study, all the judges, circuit judges and family court judges are entering their time daily on the National Center's portal to input what they're doing in that particular day. And this information is tracked by case type and what the activity is. And then also is going to capture non-case related duties. Now, the whole purpose of this is to get an aggregate statewide figure. It's not to determine how busy a judge is. It's to determine statewide average, how long do case types and the activities take, again, so that we can develop case weights based on the type, the different types of cases. Another part of the study is determining the judicial year value, and that's basically determine how many minutes a judge has available to do work over the course of the year. And so this number would incorporate things like sick days, vacation days, holidays, trainings, travel, and non-case related activities. And so what you do to determine the judicial need is you take the combined weighted caseload and combine that with the judicial availability to determine how many judges are needed in each circuit or how many magistrates are needed in each county. And then what the National Center will do is they will calculate that and then rank it in terms of greatest need to least need in terms of judicial allocation. And just to give you a hypothetical, again, so you can see how all this comes together, say hypothetically, there's 7.5 million minutes of judicial work in the state every year. And a judge can, on average, work 88,000 minutes over the year. Then if you were to just take those two numbers together, you would say the state has a total judicial workload of 85 judges is what would be needed. And so then they would take that number, the National Center will take that number and actually apply it within the circuits to identify what they call the judge deficit need. And so what you're going to see when the report comes in is you're going to see counties listed, and just again, as a hypothetical, it'll say, you know, County A has 112,000 minutes. That means that each judge in that circuit is basically doing the work of 1.27 judges, whereas County B, 75,000 minutes, every judge is doing the work of 0.85 judges. County C, 150,000 minutes, that's the work of 1.7 judges. That's how it's going to reflect the actual final result, is a reflection of how many judges are needed based on that ratio of one judge. So 2014, and I know you can't see these numbers, but I just want you to be able to see this one point. So here was actually from the 2014 result. And then here's the 5 counties or 5 circuits that got an extra judge. And so you can see the top 5 were the 5 on that list that had the most need. I do want to point out, every time I look at this, I think it's interesting that, you know, the 23rd Circuit had a current workload of 1.47 judges. The 30th Circuit had a workload of 1.46 judge. I mean, so, you know, we're really splitting hairs here to give somebody a judge at 1.47, but not give somebody a judge at 1.46. So there will kind of become a point where you just have to draw a line and figure out where you're going to put a judge or where you're not going to put a judge. But this is, again, just trying to give you an idea of what this is going to look like, so you can expect to see what the results will be. And the family court judges the same way. The top 2 in terms of judicial need were the 2 that got the additional family court judge. I talked a little bit about a Delphi study component. The magistrates, this is all they're doing. They're not doing a time study. Everybody else is doing a time study and a Delphi study. And how this works is the Delphi process is basically, it's focus group based. They break the judges and magistrates up into smaller focus groups, and they ask them, it's kind of a process where they ask some questions to refine the responses, kind of going back and forth until you can get a consensus in the room about what a particular task, how long it takes. And there are multiple results to this. It is kind of a recognized process. And for the circuit judges and the family court judges, the Delphi process will be used to confirm the accuracy of the data that comes in, to make sure that everything looks right to them. And so really, to kind of sum this all up, it's helpful to recognize what each part of the study is supposed to be looking at. So when you talk about how busy is a circuit, that's going to be based on the historical caseload data. If you're going to talk about how long does an activity take, that's the time study, that's that part of it. How accurate the data, that's the Delphi study component. And how many judges do we need, that's the final result. So that's kind of each part of the studies addressing those specific questions. So I know this is going to be something that comes up during a session. I want to go ahead and provide it now. So if you ask, how much does adding a particular circuit judge, adding a family court judge, adding a magistrate, what's the cost of that? So adding a new circuit judge, just based on the cost to the Supreme Court, a new circuit judge adds $422,000. That's salary and benefits for the judge, the judicial secretary, for the court reporter, and the law clerk, and then also the technology and things like that. So family court judge, adding a new family court judge is $272,000, and the magistrates adds $110,000. So that's what it costs to add for each one of these that you add. Now, one thing we wanted to point out, and we wanted to go ahead and kind of plant this seed now prior to the session, is when I showed you that list of how there's going to be a point when some counties and circuits clearly need an extra judge, but there's others that are busy but might not get actually a judge. The code currently sets forth that for family courts and circuit and magistrate courts, that we are capped in terms of how many of these staff people that we can provide to family court. So a secretary and a case coordinator in family court, by code, those are 1-to-1 ratios. You get one for every judge. Magistrate court, there's 1 clerk per county, 1 assistant per magistrate, and then we're capped to have 72 deputy clerks statewide. We think it's worth having a discussion about whether these numbers can be eliminated. And the idea being here is you may have a circuit or a magistrate that they're busy. Maybe they don't need another magistrate, but boy, if we could actually give them another assistant or another staff person to help the workload, that may be a good bang for your buck compared to adding a full unit versus just letting us through our budget process maybe identify some staffing needs and ways to handle some staffing concerns. So the next steps will be for the magistrate court. You'll see the study and the Supreme Court administrative order. And then for the studies for the family and circuit courts, the magistrates will have that before the first day of the session, and really hoping to have the circuit and family court judge studies before the beginning of the session. But if not, it'll be right when the session starts. We'll have those completed. And so I wanted to just kind of conclude on this one point, just to think about this. Historically, judges, what we wanted them to do is go into the courtroom, react to the problems in front of you, and go home. That was kind of the role of the judges, to address what's in front of them in their courtroom. Now, what we see is the judges are spending a lot more time kind of being proactive and in their communities and being engaged in things like in treatment courts. Treatment courts are, when our judges participate in treatment court, that's above and beyond what they're doing in addition to the docket that they all have to deal with. And so one of the questions we ask is, as you can see, we have adult drug treatment court in 46 of the 55 counties, juvenile treatment court in 24 of the 55 counties, and family treatment court in 14 of the 55 counties. And so a question we always get is, why not more? When is my county going to get a family treatment court? In order to do that, we have to make sure the judges have time to not only address what's on their docket, but also have time to devote to things like treatment courts. And so I wanted to conclude with a point that when we talk about looking at the time study, we don't want to just look at how things are, but we probably also want to look at how we want things to be, and to make sure that we give our judicial officers adequate time to do things like treatment court, adequate time to make sure their cases are moving on their dockets appropriately, adequate time to be out engaged in the community, adequate time to be able to address emergent issues that come up in their courtroom. And so again, it's not just an opportunity to look at how things are, but probably how we want things to be as a state and how we want the court system to operate. So that's my presentation. I'm happy to take questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoover. We are mindful of the clock here as we have to clear up for a meeting coming up, but we do have time for some questions if anybody has any questions for Mr. Hoover. Questions? Yes, Chair recognizes the co-chair, Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Hoover, thank you for being here. I want to, and I hate to throw you a curveball, ask you a question that's not part of the presentation, but how is the state coming with respect to e-filing throughout the circuits? If you can address that.
Sure. I think right now we are up to, 44 of the 55 counties. I think there's one more that's going to get rolled out before the completion of this year. And then the goal or the expectation is to finish the remainder of the state in the next calendar year.
Excellent. Thank you.
Further questions? Further questions? If not, thank you, Mr. Hoover. Appreciate you being here. Sorry you have to rough it here at this beautiful interim meeting. You picked a good one. Folks, we don't have a quorum present, so we will adopt the minutes perhaps at our next meeting. Is there any other business to come before the joint committee? If not, Chair recognizes co-chair Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we adjourn.
All those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed to that motion, please signify by saying no. We're adjourned.